Hello. Now I'm going to record Daf Pei, starting from Daf Ayin Tesam at Beis. The last few words, Diyoi K'dei Lichtov. The shear of to be Chai V'chatas for carrying out Diyoi ink is enough to write two letters. Tana, we learned in a Brisa that these Shtei Oisiyos are B'diyoi, that these two Oisiyos are whether you're carrying out some dry material that you can add water to it in order to write two letters, or shtei oisiyos bekolmis, or ink in a quill, and there's enough ink in the quill to write two letters, or shtei oisiyos bekalmorin, or ink in an inkwell in a container that holds enough ink for two letters. So there is an issue here. According to the Gemara, it's mashma that it's the amount of ink that you can write two letters, and it doesn't matter whether that ink is found in dry material, or it's found in a quill, or it's found in an inkwell. But the Yerushalmi disagrees, and the Yerushalmi says that, let's say, if you have enough ink in a quill, but you can't always use all the ink in the quill. There's always going to be some left. Or if you have ink in an inkwell, you can't always get all the ink out of the inkwell. There's going to be something left in the inkwell. So the shear is in order to write two letters, and if it's in an inkwell, you have to have, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say it takes 2 ounces to write two letters. So in the inkwell, it has to be 2.5 ounces, because a half an ounce is going to remain on the interior of the inkwell. If it's in a quill, then maybe it's 2.25 ounces, because a quarter ounce is going to remain in the quill. And some hold that even our Bavli also agrees with that. Boy Rav Arashayla, what would be ois achas b'dyoy, ois achas b'kulmis, or ois achas b'kalmor and mahu? What happens if you have enough ink to write one letter, which is in a form of dry material? You have enough ink on the quill to also write one letter, and you have enough ink in the inkwell also to write one letter. Is it mitzdarif? And he leaves it with a teiku. Now to explain, it is clear that if you take out two quills, and in each quill there is enough ink to write one letter, you're chayiv, whether you take them both out simultaneously or you take them out one after the other. So then why does the Gemara have a shaila here? If you took out, let's say, enough ink to write one letter in a hard material, and enough ink in a quill for one letter, or enough ink in the inkwell. So the Achrayim explain, because since according to the Yerushalmi we mentioned before, the ounce of ink in the inkwell would have to be an ounce plus, because some of it remains in the inkwell, and the let's say the ounce in the ink, let's call it an ounce. Let's say the ounce of ink in the quill is an ounce, let's say, and a quarter, because you need a little bit is going to stay in the quill. We once learned before that things that have different shiurim do not combine. Remember, we learned that, let's say, if there was eitzah, was something which you fed to a camel, and straw was something you fed to a cow. So let's say if you took out straw enough to feed a cow, but not quite, and you try to top it up with eitzah, so it doesn't combine. Why? Because there are two different shiurim. So here too, Rava wanted to know, should we say that ink in a quill and ink in a inkwell, and ink in dry material is three different shiurim, and therefore it doesn't combine? Or, since all of them have the same basic shear of ink to write two letters, that's enough to unite them, and you'll be chayiv if one letter's ink is in a quill, and one letter's ink might be in dry material, or one letter's ink might be in the inkwell. As long as you have enough to write two letters, you'll be chayiv, even though in each of these forms it would take a different really amount to write that letter. Amar Rava says, Haitzi shtei oisiyos uksavan k'shu mahalach. If you carry out enough ink to write two letters, and you write them when you're walking, chayiv, you're chayiv, because you made an akira and a reshus hayochid, and an anocha b'reshus harabim, and ksivosan zu yanachosan. The writing is the way they come to rest, even though you're moving. Similar, we had once that when you poured water onto water, that's considered its hanacha, because water on water, that's the way water comes to rest. And the way letters come to rest is on a writing surface, even though you yourself are carrying it. V'amar Rav says, Haitzi ois achas uksava, v'chazer v'haitzi ois achas uksava potter. If you take out enough ink to write one letter, and then you wrote that letter, and then you took out enough ink to write another letter, and you wrote that letter, you're potter for haitzah. Why? Because by the time you took out the ink for the second letter, the ink of the first letter dried up a bit. So therefore it has become diminished. My time, what's the reason? Be'idna da'apka lebasriyosa, when you took out the ink for the second letter, chaser le'lishur de kamaisam. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the 2 letters of ink is 2 ounces. So first you took out an ounce and you wrote the letter. So now you have a hanocha of an ounce, and you're going to make another hanocha of another ounce. By the time you make the hanocha of the second ounce, the hanocha of the first ounce has diminished to become, let's say, 8/10 of an ounce, because some of it has evaporated. Which means that at the time you make hanocha of the second half, you don't have a full shear anymore. Omar Rava says, Haitzi chatzi gregeres achas v'nicha, v'chazer v'haitzi chatzi gregeres achar v'nicha. If you took out a half a gregeres of food, that's the shear for itself food, and then you took out another half a gregeres and put it down, Rishayna nasa kemishaklota kelev aishanisrfa upater. It's considered as if the first half of gregeres was swallowed by a dog or burnt, and you're potter. I don't know why. But why? Homancha. The first half of gregeres is lying in the street, and the second half of gregeres is also lying in the street. So together you might see a full gregeres. The Gemara answers, Hachi Kamar, this is what Rava meant to say. Vim kadam v'gbia harishayna, kaidam anacha shniya, nasas rishayna k'mishaniklata aishanisrfa upater. If you pick up the first half of gregeres, and only then you bring out the second half and put it down, which means that you don't have a hanocha of an entire gregeres at one time. Because by the time you made the hanocha of the second gregeres, the first one had already lost its hanocha. And therefore, in order to be chai for itzah, you have to have an akira of a shear and the hanocha of a shear. And even if you do it in 2 halves, it might also be okay. But at least at the time of the hanocha, the entire shear should be here. So if you picked up the first half of gregeres, it's as if a dog had swallowed or had gotten burnt. V'amar Rava says, Haitzi chatzi gregeres v'nicha, v'chazer v'haitzi chatzi gregeres v'avira derech aleh chayiv. If you take out a half a gregeres of food and put it on the ground in the Rishus Harabim, and you have another half a gregeres that you carry out and you pass over the first half of gregeres, you're going to be chayiv, because a half and a half makes a whole. The Gemara asks, V'amai holeinach. If your second half of gregeres is only passing over the first half, it never rested, so you don't have a hanocha. The Gemara answers, Kan shavira tach shloisha. When you moved your hand, you were moving it less than 3 tefachim from the ground. Less than 3 tefachim from the ground is called lavud, and it's considered as if it rested in the Rishus Harabim together with the first half. But V'amar Rava says, Tach shloisha l'rabbanan tzar hanocha al gabi mashu. If you remember earlier, we learned Rabbi Kiva, it's kluta k'mishun chadami. Anything that's flying is considered as if it rests in flight. But the Rabbanan don't agree, and they said that anything that's in flight actually has to have hanocha to be considered resting. So here, why would you consider the second half of gregeres as if it rested? Lekasha, kam b'zayrik and kam b'mavir. When it's thrown and it's flying through the air, it's not considered resting. But here, if you have it in your hand, as you pass your hand with half a gregeres on top of the first half, since it's in your hand, that's considered enough of a hanocha when A, it's in your hand, and B, it's less than 3 tefachim from the ground. Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbanan taught in the Brayso, Chatzi gregeres v'chazer v'haitzi chatzi gregeres v'helam echad. If you take out a half a gregeres of food and put it down b'Rishus Harabim, then you take out another half a gregeres, and it was all done in one big lapse of memory. So you're chai v'chatas, because in the end you might see a full gregeres with one lapse of memory. B'shtei halamas, what if you realize between the first half and the second half that you had carried something out? Then you're potter. By the way, this is not according to Rav Gamliel, because Rav Gamliel said, Ein yediyah l'chatzi shir. Knowledge of sin is only if you are aware that you did something to be guilty for. But since the first is only a half and the second is a half, knowledge in between, according to Rav Gamliel, wouldn't count. But we don't hold like Rav Gamliel here in this brisa. So therefore, if you became aware between the first half and the second half, it splits the 2 actions, they don't add up. B'shtei alamayis, so potter. Rabbi Yossi says, B'helam echad, even in one lapse of memory, you're only chayiv if you're l'rishus echad, if it goes to the same Rishus Harabim. But l'shtei rishuyos, if the 2 halves, each one went to a different Rishus Harabim, you're potter. Amar Rabba, so Rabba explains in Rabbi Yossi's opinion, V'ushi yesh chiyuv chatas beinayim. That means, let's say you have a house which is a Rishus HaYochid, which is my Gemara here in front of me. If half of Gregaris went to the right side of the Gemara, to one Rishus HaRabim, the other half of Gregaris went to the left side, to the other Rishus HaRabim, so you're potter, because the two Rishus HaRabim separate, that it becomes two different acts. Aval Karmelis loy, but if in the middle you don't have a Rishus HaYochid, you only have a Karmelis, being only a Rishus D'Rabbanan is not a place that's choshev enough to split between the two Rishus HaRabim, so therefore you'll be chayiv if you might see Rishus HaYochid Rishus HaRabim A and Rishus HaYochid Rishus HaRabim B, and the two Rishus HaRabim are separated by Karmelis, you'll be chayiv. Abayam Rabbayis Zafila Karmelis. Even if a Karmelis separates between the two Rishus HaRabim, it's also split and you'll be potter. Aval Pisla Loi. I'll explain soon. But what happens if the two Rishus HaRabim are being separated by a long block of wood? That doesn't separate them into two Rishus HaRabim. Rav Amarav says Afilu Pisla. Even a block of wood will separate the two Rishus HaRabim. And Va'az the Rava Latame, Rava goes according to his own Shita, Damar Rava. Rava once said, Rishus Shabbos ki Rishus Gittin Damya, that Shabbos is like Gittin. Let me explain. If a husband gives his wife Rishus, permission, to be kaina, a get that's in his chotzer, and then he puts the get into the chotzer, so since he gave her Rishus to be kaina, she is kaina the get and she's divorced. What happens if in the middle of his chotzer he has a block of wood? So therefore he gave her a shus to be kind with the chutzner, not of the block of wood. So if the get landed on top of the block of wood, she's not mugareshes. So evidently, Rava considers the block of wood as it's a unit, it's an object, and it has value. So Rava says the same goes for Shabbos, that a block of wood in the middle of the Rishus HaRabim will separate Rishus HaRabim A from Rishus HaRabim B. And therefore, according to Rava, everything splits. Whether you have a Rishus HaYochid between the two Rishus HaRabim, or you have a Karmelis between the two Rishus HaRabim, or even a block of wood between the two Rishus HaRabim, it splits them into two Rishus HaRabim, and according to Rabbi Yossi, half a Karmelis in one, half a Gregaris in one, half a Gregaris in the other is poter. What is this block of wood? So the Chayr, if this block of wood is 10 tefachim high, and it's less than Daled al Daled, so that's called a Mokum P'tur. So if it's more than 10 tefachim high and less than Daled al Daled, and it's a Mokum P'tur, so evidently it doesn't have any identity of its own, and it's bottled to the two Rishus HaRabim, and that could not possibly separate between the two Rishus HaRabim. So Elamai, we're talking about something which is Daled al Daled, but less than 10 tefachim high. But that's called a Karmelis. So then Abai is contradicting himself. First he says that a Karmelis will divide between the two Rishus HaRabim, but not this block of wood. But what kind of block of wood? If the block of wood is less than 10 tefachim high and it's Daled al Daled, it's a Karmelis. And Abai said it does split. The answer is when Abai says that a Karmelis can split between two Rishus HaRabim, he's talking about a Karmelis in real estate, a Karmelis in land mass. So that he holds splits between two Rishus HaRabim. But a block of wood, even though halachically may have a din of a Karmelis, but since it's movable, he holds that's not something that's going to divide the Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaRabim A, Rishus HaRabim B. And Rav holds even that block of wood will also separate the two Rishus HaRabim. So one more time. If you carry out a half a groigris and then another half a groigris to the same Rishus HaRabim, for sure you're chayiv. If you carry out a half a groigris to one Rishus HaRabim and half a groigris to the other, so it's not, Rabbi Yossi says it's not mistarv. What makes two Rishus HaRabim into two Rishus HaRabim? Rabbah said if there is a Rishus HaYochid in the middle, that really separates the two Rishus HaRabim. Abai says even a Karmelis will separate the two Rishus HaRabim, but not a mobile Karmelis, like a block of wood, which is less than 10 tefachim high, more than Daled al Daled. And Rava holds even that block of wood will also separate between one Rishus HaRabim and the other. Chayil, the blue coloring of the eye, how much are you chayiv when you carry out on Shabbos? Kadei lik chayil ayin achas, enough to color one eye. Ayin achas olekachli, who colors one eye? Amravuna shekain tznuah is kachlis ayin achas. Women that are tznuah would cover part of their face, only one eye was visible, and the one eye that was visible, they would color it. Meisivei, the Gemara responds with a question. Reb Shimon Elazar says the shear to carry out chayil, this blue material, if it's im l'refuah, if it's for medicinal purposes, well, then you're chayiv even if you carry out enough to color one eye, because that's what people would use for medicinal purposes. But vim lekashet, if it's for cosmetics, it's b'shtei einayim. So you see that the shear for this chayil is dafka for two eyes, and there's no mention made that in a place where women would cover part of their face, it's enough to have enough color for one eye. That brisa that says it's two eyes is speaking about villages. In villages, there's less indecency going on in villages, and therefore there the women felt more comfortable in exposing their faces, and both eyes were open. So the shear for kachal would be enough to put cosmetic on both eyes. But in cities where things are a little more loose, so therefore the women used to be more tsanua, they covered part of their face, so their kachal would be a shear even to color even one eye. The shear for taking out shava wax is kedelitin alpinak of cotton, in order to block a small hole in a barrel that holds wine. Tana, we learned kedelitin alpinak of cotton shel yayin, to close a small hole in a barrel of wine. Why is that important? Because if it's honey or oil, so it's more viscous. So in order for it to pour, the hole is larger. But wine is more fluid, so the hole to pour wine is much smaller, and therefore it's enough wax to stuff even such a small hole of a barrel of wine. You're chayiv if you carry out that amount of wax, because that amount of wax is valuable. Devek kedelitim b'rosh hashafshaf, glue to put on top of a board. Tana, we learned what's the glue on top of a board? Kedelitim b'rosh shafshaf sheb'rosh kana shel sayadim. The hunters used to have a pole, and on top of the pole they used to put a plank or a board, and on top of the board they put glue. So when birds used to land on the board, they were stuck, and that's how they used to catch them. Zephes v'gafris kedelasois, enough tar or sulfur in order to block a hole. What kind of a hole? Tana, we learned in a brayso kedelasois neck of cotton. There used to be a container that held mercury, and the mercury used to have a hole that they used to spill it out, and then they had to block the hole. So they used to block the hole. I guess chemically it was good to block a hole that had mercury in it with tar or sulfur. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm afraid we're running a long time. Okay, we'll try to upload this, and then we'll do the